Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I realised I haven't done a proper reading wrap up for the majority of the summer. I did one for May and June, so I'll go ahead and watch that video if you haven't seen it already. But I thought I would do one to wrap up the rest of the books that I read this summer because I love talking about them. If I don't talk about them, I will forget about them, and I hate recommending a book knowing that I loved it but then not even being able to tell the person why. So these are great for me. I love watching them. They're really fun to film, honestly. So I'm gonna go ahead and get straight in with the books I read in July. Technically the first book I finished in July was Queen of Shadows, but I believe I did talk about that in my May and June wrap up because I was pretty much finished with it by the end of June. So the next book that I read was The Mysterious Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton. I'd heard of India Holton I just seen her name about, and she had a really good recommendation written on Emily Wilde. So I knew I wanted to get to her work at some point, see what her vibe was. And this was not what I was expecting. Really wasn't. And it took me a bit to warm to it. But after a while, I kind of accepted what it was for what it was, and I had a fun time. Basically, I gave this book a 3 stars. It was just so random. I mean, the covers are stunning, so this is my fault. I didn't research it properly, but I was really thinking it was going to be like a Bridgerton crossover with something a bit more violent. But the way that the violence was spoken about in this book, it was just so goofy. And yeah, I don't know, at first I found it a bit too cringy, a bit too just like really otherworldly. I mean, it follows a girl called Cecilia, and she is part of the Mysterious Society of Lady Scoundrels. It's kind of like, imagine like the DAR in Gilmore Girls, but like way back when, full of badass women who assassinate people. It's like, it is crazy. But currently in society, Cecilia's quite low down and she wants to like work her way up the ranks and be a really esteemed, respected member of this society. And Cecilia gets given a task to assassinate a certain person who is just deemed a bit dangerous to their cause and just someone who they don't like, basically. However, he is also a paid assassin and he has been given a task to kill her. So immediately it's kind of like an enemies kind of situation. Obviously, this is not just a book about assassination. There is a romance, so it is like an enemies to lovers situation going on here. But yeah, it was just it was so wacky and goofy, and at first I was really struggling to read it. I did think the dialogue was a bit weird, like some of it felt really old English, which is fine because, you know, this is set many decades ago. But also then other points it kind of didn't marry up to that, and then it didn't sound old English, and it didn't flow very well in that sense. So that kind of was a bit annoying. But once I got over the just ridiculous plot line and just accepted that it was going to be a bit of a crazy read, I then started to really enjoy it. You just can't take it too seriously. Next up, we have Reckless by Lauren Roberts. Now, this has been everywhere. It was probably one of the most anticipated reads of this year for a lot of people because Powerless was just incredible. I think about that book all the time. Undisputed 5-star read for me. Obsessed with it. This suffers from middle child syndrome, unfortunately, because I believe this is going to be a trilogy. So there is one more book coming. This really was a bridging book, and there's just nothing really going on. When I first read this, I literally gave it a 4.5 stars. And I think the only reason why was because I was still very in love with the characters, was still very much invested in their relationship. But on reflection, it really did not live up to any kind of standard that Powerless had set. Obviously, I can't give away too much of what happens in this book. Being part of a series, it's going to give spoilers away, but we're basically following all of the characters that we see in Powerless and the development in the plots. And there's, again, kind of a cat and mouse situation going on in this book, but it was so repetitive, and it just wasn't adding any substance to the plot or any relevance to the plot whatsoever. Like, you literally could have cut out huge amounts of this book and it wouldn't have made any difference to the storyline. Like, you still would have been able to follow and you wouldn't have missed anything, basically, which was so disappointing. I've heard people saying, you know, it's a bridging book, its purpose is to get you to that final book and for everything to kind of blow up and escalate, but I don't think that's an excuse. I've read so many second books or middle books that were just as incredible, maybe even more incredible than the book that came before it. So I wasn't really gonna let it slide for me. It just, the saving grace really was the characters, because otherwise I think this would have fallen even flatter for me. But I had such a strong connection to Kai and Payden that it kind of helped me get through it a little bit more. I will also commend the ending. The ending was pretty nuts. But yeah, all in all, a disappointment. Then after a lot of fantasy, I was craving something a bit more lighthearted and definitely summery. So then I turned to The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han, one of the two. And this just really hit the spot. This is exactly what I was looking for at the time. I hadn't seen the TV show yet and I really wanted to watch it, so I decided to give the book a try. I rated this 4 stars. I feel like I could maybe lower that now to a 3.5. Have I thought about this since finishing it? No, I haven't, but during the time it was a really quick, easy read. I binged this within a couple of days, I think. Probably could have done a whole day if I wanted to. Sorry, ran out of phone storage then. Anyway, it basically follows a girl called Belly, and she goes to her little summer house vacation every summer with her mum, her friend, and her children. And they've been doing it for years and years and years, but they're getting to that age now. Some of them are going to college, some of them are in their latter years of high school, and secret crushes and just coming of age things are happening in this book. And it was just so perfectly cutesy and easy to read, honestly. It took me back to when I was that age and like going to parties and sometimes doing things that you shouldn't be doing, but it's just all part of the process and learning and growing. And yeah, I had a really great time with it. Like I say, it was mostly just very lighthearted. There was a couple of slightly deeper topics there involved. We do talk about diseases and like grief and things, but overall, not a lot to really say. Just a really good, easy read. I don't know if I'm going to continue the series though, which is weird to say because I did enjoy this, but I just don't know if it's something that I am that intrigued about. I just really wanted to read this so I felt like I could start watching this series, and it just filled the gap that I was craving at the time. So then I moved on to Wildfire by Hannah Grace, and I loved this. Hannah Grace is definitely becoming a favourite author of mine. I rated this a 4 stars, and it was another perfect read for the summertime. It follows our 2 main characters, Aurora and Russ, and they both take part in a sort of summer camp for the summer, obviously, as like, what do you call them, like mentors or camp counselors? There you go. So they're basically working and looking after the children, setting up activities, leading activities, you know, things like that. And I don't know if I had a slightly softer spot for this as well, because I used to work at a children's nursery, so it's not the same, but also it kind of, I could kind of relate a little bit to some of the things that are going on when they're having to interact with the kids. And yeah, I don't know, it just brought back a bit of nostalgia for me because I did really enjoy that element of my job when I worked at a children's nursery. But yes, naturally it is a spicy romance book. Russ is like the perfect golden retriever boy, but he's also a little bit shy. Like, he's not too crazy and bubbly. He has that little like solemn part to him, but I really liked him as a character. He was really sweet, really gentlemanly, and Aurora was just a happy little ray of sunshine as well. So the perfect cutesy little couple in my opinion. But the catch of this book is that whilst working at the summer camp, there is a very strict rule between camp counsellors that they're not allowed to get involved with each other. However, Russ and Aurora had met each other previous to summer camp, only once or twice, I believe, at a sort of end of year party at their college, and straight away Russ had eyes for Aurora, so he's pretty down bad already. But when he realizes that she's also going to be working at the summer camp that he works at, he realizes that it's going to be pretty difficult not to act on his feelings. There's almost like a forbidden love element to it because they're not supposed to be dating, so it was just really exciting, really vibey, another really fun romance read for the summertime. Then I moved on to a different kind of Reckless. So this time it was Reckless by Elsie Silver. This is the 4th book in the Chestnut Springs series, and unpopular opinion, but my least favourite. I gave this 3.5 stars, which is my least rated book from that series by quite a bit, and I don't know, I feel like this is everyone's favourite almost in the series. And like, I can appreciate it, but at the same time, I just really don't know what was so special about this book. It follows Theo Silva, who is Rhett from the first book's sort of, oh, what's the word? Rhett is Theo's mentor in like the bull riding industry, but Theo ends up running into Winter, who's Summer from the first book's sister. And blah, 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 things get steamy, they have a one-night stand, and Winter ends up pregnant with Theo's baby. So we've got a surprise pregnancy in here, which straight off the bat isn't everyone's favourite. I personally thought I would definitely enjoy this book because surprise pregnancy is actually something that's never really bothered me. As long as it's handled well, I have no issues with the surprise pregnancy trope. But why I didn't love this book, I think, was because it was so physical. Like, everything between Theo and Winter just felt way more physical than it did emotional or like soulful. Like, I felt like their connection wasn't really there. There was literally nay a page gone where there was some kind of hint or reference to how much they found each other physically attractive, and I just wasn't digging that. I also just didn't think that Theo was that much of a crazy, amazing guy based on the way that he was acting with Winter and their child, because in my eyes, like, sure, if you're the father of someone's child on a one-night stand basis and they find you and they tell you that you have a child, and like, obviously if you want to be involved, then great, like, show up for your child, that's fantastic. But surely that's what you should be doing. I don't know, I see a lot of people like really like, oh, Theo's such a great guy, but I'm like, well, I kind of think he's just doing what he should be doing. He's not doing anything crazy out of the ordinary for Winter. He's just being a dad. And I don't know, like, I appreciate that, don't get me wrong, but it didn't make my heart burst. It didn't make me obsessed with him or their relationship. So yeah, I have not really thought about this at all since I read it, which says everything really. It's just such a shame. I mean, 3.5 isn't a bad rating anyway, but it just wasn't as good as I expected it to be. And that's okay. The next book I read is like nothing I have ever read before, and I freaking loved it. Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. This is a serial killer romance. Crazy, but oh my god, so addicting, so funny, and just so unique. It follows 2 characters called Rowan and Sloane, and they're both serial killers. It's giving Dexter. If you've seen Dexter, they're serial killers, but they're only killing people that are horrendous, like bad people. They're basically killing other killers, other people that commit horrible crimes. They're basically bringing justice to the world by killing them off, if that makes sense. They're both very notorious, very well known, and they end up meeting. Sloane gets herself in a really bad situation and Rowan rescues her, and they basically figure out who the other person is, and they strike up a challenge once a year. They put a target on someone's back, and the first person to track them down and kill them wins the challenge for that year. I know, it's literally crazy, but it is so good and so addicting. So we kind of have, I suppose, a rivals to lovers situation going on in this book, and the tension was just so good. Rowan is down bad throughout this entire book. Like, Sloane plays it pretty cool. I loved her as a character. She was such a girl boss, but she doesn't really let on too much, whereas Rowan is just so obviously obsessed with this girl. He kind of says it straight from the beginning of the book, but watching him pining for her was just so good. I'd also say the spices can be, I was gonna say pretty intense. Not crazy intense, but like it's very explorative in this book, which is not like something I've really read a lot of before. And I don't know, I just appreciated that because I feel like, I wouldn't say it's always vanilla in mainstream romances, not necessarily, but I don't know, this one just kind of thought outside the box a bit more. And I just appreciated it as something different, you know, so something to also think about. But yeah, if I haven't said already, I gave this 4 stars. I devoured it pretty quickly actually. And yeah, it was gory in places, I won't lie, especially the first chapter, it kind of throws you straight in. So just prepare yourself for that if you do want to get involved in this. but it wasn't actually that gory at all. There was probably maybe two, maybe 3 chapters that kind of explored gore in a bit more detail, but other than that, it wasn't anything too wild. So if you don't have a strong stomach, you can still get into this. I'm 100% going to read Leather and Lark and continue this series because I had the best time with it. By this point, I'd read quite a lot of romance, so I was looking for another dip into the fantasy world, but still wanted to keep it kind of summery, so I decided to go with To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo, and this was a bit of a disappointment, not gonna lie. I gave this a 2.5 stars, so my least rated book for a while. It's a Little Mermaid retelling, so already the story is quite familiar, which is what I was looking forward to because this is a standalone, so it's not like you have to get yourself into a new fantasy series. And I thought, great, because I didn't want to commit, you know? And I thought, also being a retelling, I haven't got to use so much brain power to figure out what's going on. I know what's going on. It's a very popular story. But having said that, it was so boring. And I don't mean that because I knew what was happening. It just, for me, nothing really happened. I literally read this a month ago, pretty much to the day, so not long ago at all, and I can't really tell you anything that happened in this book other than the pivotal obvious moments that happen in the fairy tale. Yeah, there's not really much to say about this. I just feel like it could have been more epic, you know, like it's just really giving like a much more sinister turn on the original tale. It really sounds like it, you know, the sirens in this book, they kill humans to collect their hearts and it's part of their culture, but then there's some humans that are obviously hunting the sirens and purging the world from them, and so it sounds like it's going to be a really high stakes, intense book, but it just wasn't. The last couple of chapters, sure, that's all I remember, is there was some pretty epic battle scenes between like the sea witch, who would be Ursula, and the people fighting to purge these creatures from their seas. That was kind of good. But up until that point, it was so dull. Then I went on to read Mixed Signals by B.K. Borison, which is the 3rd book in the Love Like Farms series, which is like a small town romance series. It's really cutesy, really cozy, actually perfect for this time of year. And each book follows a different season. This was summer, which is why I picked it up in August. And this was my favourite book in the series by far. I gave it 4.5 stars. I had the best time with it. I actually couldn't stop reading it. It follows Layla and Caleb, and Layla is the baker in this small town, and holy moly, I've forgotten what Caleb does. I think he just works on the farm somehow, but my god, I've forgotten. Their relationship just blossomed really well. Caleb is kind of like an anxious guy. He needs a bit of reassurance, and I honestly just wanted to give him a hug throughout the majority of this book. But the baking was still quite a pivotal point in the plot. I remember there was a few chapters about like Layla's bakery is going to be featured in a magazine, and like the way Caleb just comes through to like help her prepare and make sure everything goes well, and is like there for her and cares for her, and oh, he was just so sweet. There was only one main problem with this, and that was the 3rd act conflict. It just felt so petty and unnecessary to me, and I hate it when the 3rd act conflict is like that. I'm not a 3rd act conflict hater, like I'm not. I can appreciate it when it makes sense and is like age appropriate for the characters, because sometimes I swear 3rd act conflicts are just like, people of that age would not have issues with that. Like they just wouldn't. Anyway, that aside, and it didn't last too long, so that was good. This was a really good book. And then the last book that I read for the summer, and I kicked it off with a bang, is Beach Read by Emily Henry. And my god, I understand the hype. This didn't quite reach a 5-star potential, but I did settle for a 4.5. I think if I reread this, knowing what I know now, by the end of it, I feel like I could definitely give it a 5 stars. So I think it'll be on my radar next year to reread. But oh my god, the emotional depth that Emily Henry packs into some of these romance books is unmatched. It was literally an emotional roller coaster all over. Like, one minute you're pining for Gus, then you're feeling bad for him and crying for him, and then he behaves in the way that you're questioning. But the premise of this book is that January and Gus are in a rivalry on who can publish their next book the quickest. But the catch is they have to swap genres. So they're writing a genre that they're not familiar with. He has to write a romance and she has to write like a lit fic kind of situation. When it starts, January is in a bit of a rut. She's moved into this beach house that belonged to her late father. She's unraveling secrets about him and the life that he was leading. She's feeling a bit stuck in her career. There's a lot going on in her life throughout this book, and unpacking that, and then also unpacking Gus and his turmoils in life as well. It just, oh my God, I can't get my words out. Emily Henry just writes characters in a way that makes you as a reader feel so seen and valued and understood, because I swear to God, like, I read Happy Place in June as well. I've read this now, and like, both Harriet from Happy Place and January from this both faced things in their lives that just hit so close to home for me and were written in a way that it just put my feelings down on paper. And like, if someone wanted to ask me how I felt about something, I could just literally open it up to a page and be like, read that, and it will make sense. But that aside, just talking about like the romance in general, incredible banter. The banter that January and Gus have is so funny and like clever and witty, and just, it's like watching a freaking tennis match, and I loved it. And just the premise of the book, right, like the author rivalry in general, it was so entertaining and intriguing, and the way they do their research to make sure that they're, you know, writing their books well, and the way they like help each other out, and you just see their relationship turning from a rivalry into something more throughout the book. And oh God, yeah, if you can't tell, I was obsessed with this. I'll be thinking about these two characters for a very, very, very long time. And yeah, I'm already excited to reread this, because I just think it's going to hit even better the second time around. And that, my friends, is all the books I have to talk to you about. So I hope you enjoyed this little wrap up. It's so funny when you do wrap ups like this that are more seasonal than monthly, and you think it's really interesting to think back to the beginning of the season and see which books you still remember a lot about and which books you thought you really enjoyed but you've forgotten about. I find that so intriguing. I've been writing a lot more of my reviews, brief reviews, on the Fable app, which I think is now my favourite app to use when documenting my thoughts and feelings on books. Goodreads, way too basic. Storygraph, I like the stats, but that's about it. Fable kind of gives you the best of both worlds. And there's just so many fun features on there, so I'd recommend using Fable if you don't already. But it's definitely helping me to just write little notes and jot down how I've been feeling about each of my books. But it's time to get into full season, guys. So keep your eyes peeled for some fall, autumnal, spooky themed reading vlogs. I've got a few ideas written down, and I am so excited to film those for you. But if you did like this video, please like, comment and subscribe, and I will catch you next week with a brand new video. Bye, friends.